Covering the Universal Orlando Resort for over 5 years, you are listening to the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 230 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast. I'm your host Lee, and joining me as usual are Darren.
Oh, what's up, Internet?
And Tracy.
Hello.
And Hunter's probably at Disney somewhere. But we have, sorry Hunter, a much better replacement. We have an illustrious returning guest. You may know him from the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish, the Huffington Post, and of course JimHillMedia.com, the legend himself, Mr. Jim Hill. Hi Jim.
Whoa, okay, there's no way I'm living up to that intro. Hi, how are you?
Well, actually, Jim, we've had you on before, and we've had listeners who haven't listened to the show for that long, who didn't know who the hell you were, basically. So they kind of complained that we didn't introduce you properly, so they didn't know who you were. So from now on, everyone's getting a proper introduction so everyone knows who they are.
Okay. That's I'm one of the internet dinosaurs. Why don't we just put it that way? Just back when we used to do this with pen and paper. So
that is a long time ago.
Nothing wrong with pen and paper.
It is. It doesn't see much nowadays. If the internet went now, I was thinking about this today. If the internet went down now, everyone would be screwed. But right, Jim has agreed to join us, as he has done for at least the last 3 or 4 years, for our annual look at what's coming at Universal Orlando this year and potentially beyond. So, Jim, this year, I think as a whole, is slightly quieter, if you can call it that. I think there's less things happening, but the things that are happening are potentially bigger.
All right, so just to be clear here, the water theme park, the whole brand new park that they're building is small. It's something we're going to overlook.
Yeah, there's lesser things, but bigger in grandeur.
Oh, you're gonna make the people at Universal Creative so happy to hear that. The water park. Yeah.
That thing.
No, I mean that's again. You have to understand with Universal, this is all chess. All right, and face it. The year that Disney is finally opening, Pandora, the World of Avatar, which is, let's remember, this is their long coming response to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So, and you got to give Universal credit that. So how do you deal with, that's the gimmick of Pandora, is they're not taking you to, the Wizarding World. They're taking you off planet. I mean, just, they're literally, you're leaving Earth and you go into this, brand new planet. So, how do you combat that? You throw an entire park at that. And, that's really what, we're talking about with Volcano Bay. This is, and to me, it's fascinating to watch that, Disney's idea of how to combat this is, okay, we'll put a new slide in at Typhoon Lagoon, and it's sort of the equivalent of, it's a sucking chest wound, but hey, let's get a Band-Aid. I mean, this is a game changer. This is going to give people who go to Universal. In fact, it's so funny we're talking today because Nancy was just at lunch with friends, and totally spontaneously, the friend talks about how they're flying down to Orlando the latter part of this month. And they're doing 3 days at Disney, and then they're going over to Universal. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to do that. That they have, they booked rooms at Cabana Bay, and it's, because Disney honestly doesn't make it easy if you are leaving Disney to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things where she's actually thinking of renting a van at the airport. Because she has 5 family members who will already be down there at Disney. She's actually just flying in for the Universal leg, which think about how extraordinary that is, that just in this past 5, 6, 7 year period from when Wizarding World opened, that there are people actually flying into Orlando and it's like, I don't need to go to Disney, but I can't miss the Universal leg. I mean, that's kind of stunning, at least to me. That the world has changed like that. That people are now flying into, Orlando, and it's like, I miss Disney, but I was perfectly happy because I went to Universal.
Yeah.
It is. It's taken away from when people think of Orlando. That's all they think of is Disney. But now people aren't so much just thinking of Disney.
Face it. That in fact, that's what's kind of interesting is just in the past month we lost Charlie Ridgway. He was the first real significant publicist for Walt Disney World, and I remember talking with Charlie, and he's said, "Look, you have to understand in 1969, 1970." When we were building this thing out in the middle of the swamps and, getting out of Jeeps and going, make sure that there are no snakes that will bite you. It was kind of they weren't entirely sure that Walt Disney was going to work, that people were actually going to fly into Orlando and do this. And, and that was the thing with Universal, even when Universal was coming down to Florida. In fact, I was just reading Sam Ganaway's book, J-Bangs. By the way, have you had Sam on the show yet? Or
Yes, we've had Sam on a couple of times. Yeah. I haven't had him on to talk about that book yet, which is something I keep meaning to reach out to him about.
Okay, because it's again, Jay Stein has some absolutely amazing stories about the creation of that, of Universal Orlando. In fact, Jay was in the room when Michael Eisner was there, and they were pitching it, and yeah, this is a great idea. And 2 years later, and we're going to have the exact same idea. Yeah, Universal, they had the land for years and wouldn't build because they felt it was a risk, that, they were worried that people would just go to Disney. And, to build something down the road, that's why they met with Paramount. And actually, that's why they reached out to Disney in 84, 85 and, wanted to say, hey, why don't you be our partners with this? And that's when Eisner dropped the bomb about, yeah, we're kind of doing something on our own with that. So, but yeah, this is finally that year. This is the year where Disney starts to roll out its answers to the Wizarding World. And, we'll get to see the really big one in 2019 or thereabouts with Star Wars Experience. Mm-hmm. But by then, in theory, we could already be going into, the Nintendo stuff. That's the intriguing part right now, is that I think we talked about this last year with, that the plan had always been to close Wet and Wild, which, by the way, it's been now a week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Since Wet and Wild closed, and and Universal didn't waste any time. I was reading about Eric Yates, and he dropped his GoPro,
yes,
and was trying to contact the Lost and Found, over at Wet and Wild, and it's like, there is no Lost and Found here anymore. There's no more Wet and Wild.
On the positive side, he did get it back.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, he did.
Wow. Okay. No, that's great news. But again, they shut that place down in a heartbeat. And a lot of my understanding is a lot of the slides, they're now debating about whether they're being sold off to third parties. And, they're going to clear that site relatively quickly. But again, the plan was that was going to be the thing that was developed because it was so close to property, and then you invented a transportation system for the next thing you were building that was close to Universal Orlando Resort. But then that huge chunk of property over by the convention center, the Lockheed land, came available. And it was so fascinating to watch in the past year to how Universal kind of pivoted away from this, okay, soon as we can, we clear the Wet and Wild land and we get ready to put whatever we're putting in over there. And then to suddenly have this other option and to watch things go quiet while they began moving pieces that had previously been intended for the Wet and Wild property. the potential, it's like, okay, so if we change this, if we take this from our little confined piece of land that we had for Wet n Wild and then move it over to our giant chunk of land that, over by the convention center, what happens? And then, of course, you have to go to Comcast, you have to, because Tom Williams, has to actually get the funding for this. It's an interesting time. They've reconfigured their plans, and my understanding is we've gone from a 5-year plan to they're now looking at a 10 to 15-year plan based on what they have for property and how they want to grow the parks, or excuse me, grow the Universal Resort experience. And no, that's a serious thing. They are, because that's the notion. It's like, how are we going to differentiate ourselves from Disney? And more to the point, how are we now going to take all these people who've come here, who've had a great time, and give them reasons to come back? Yeah. And let's be honest, you're not getting on a plane to go experience Jimmy Fallon, now are you?
Actually, me and Tracy are two people who actually seem to quite like Jimmy Fallon, whereas it seems a lot of people don't.
Well, we're recording this the day after the Golden Globes, where Jimmy was the host, and the teleprompter went down, and it was like, "Ignore the man behind the curtain." Very famous for being able to ad lib as long as they're written out ahead of time.
All right.
So, and that coupled with the fact that I as Universal began working on this attraction, that there were a number of stories. Jimmy kept turning up on the set of The Tonight Show with like broken hands where he'd fallen while drinking. And it was just one of these things where it's like, there's a worry that maybe we bet on the wrong horse. But at the same time, long range, what Universal, one of the reasons Universal wanted to do this was they want The Tonight Show to start coming down to the theme parks, and to shoot a series of show at least once or twice a year there, and that makes it that much more exciting. That puts the parks out in the front window. This is sort of an expansion of the. They've been doing something similar with the Today Show.
Yes.
A couple of they're down there quite often doing shows or presentations of that sort of thing, so that they're looking to use all of the arms of the NBC empire, or excuse me, NBC Universal empire, to keep the park in the front window.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we probably should talk about the Harry Potter movie deal. Did you guys hear about this in the UK? That
was the NBC thing, wasn't it? Where they're allowed to show them all on cable. Is that right?
Yeah, but this is the thing. They're starting in 2018. I mean, right now, Freeform, which used to be ABC Family, which of course was owned by Disney, it seems like every 6 weeks they would do a Harry Potter movie marathon weekend. And I'm a complete sucker. I mean, I'll be grazing, and it's like, oh, it's Goblet of Fire. I've only seen this 1,200 times, but okay. I'll just hang in until my favorites. Oh, and then it's the next one, and I'll lose an entire weekend that way. They get that moves over to Sci-Fi, which is an interesting choice of all the NBC Universal cable channels. I mean, let's be honest, these days, Sci-Fi is mostly known for Sharknado, which oddly enough, again, has been shot once or twice at the Universal Orlando parks.
Is it the third one?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, so it would seem that the moving Potter there, that's they're looking to reposition that as a more high profile, more family oriented cable channel. I mean, that's the thing. If you have Potter, and more to the point, they not only have Potter, they have Fantastic Beasts. And supposedly, if you drill down into the language of the deal, they also have, when they're finally made, the trilogy of movies that will be based on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Okay.
So, you're talking, when this is all said and done, what is that? So we have the 8 Harry Potter films. We have the in theory, the 5 Fantastic Beasts plus 3. So what, 16? Again, it'll be like the Law and Order channel, only Harry Potter, 24/7.
That's quite a catalog. Gosh.
But the only problem with that is, and I guess they're already having conversations about Fantastic Beasts. I think what I've been told is they're waiting for the box office from film 2 before they start to get serious. But the last I looked at it, it's, what is it? Fantastic Beasts is at $750 million worldwide already.
It wouldn't surprise me. Wow.
It was really good. I hope they implement something from it into the parks, because Tracy was a bit ill the day we saw it, so she slept through a lot of it, but I thought it was fantastic. The only thing that put me off was Johnny Depp. I can't stand Johnny Depp. When he turned up at the end, I was like, nope, done.
Well, I get that, and you understand that he's with this thing till the very end, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, supposedly film 5 ends in 1945. There's supposedly the greatest wizard battle of all time happened between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Yeah. And coincidentally, World War II ended right after this happened. So you're sort of supposed to infer that, one was playing for one side and one was playing for the other. But yeah, that's going to be how this plays out. Now, what is it? So we have 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, and then starting in 2026, we get into our Cursed Child trilogy. And meanwhile, what's interesting is you chat with the folks at Universal Creative. There was evidently this fascinating moment where it's like, okay, we have our New York section of the park, for Universal Studios Florida, and obviously, Fantastic Beasts is set, or at least this first film is set in, New York City of 1926. And it's like, shouldn't we do something here? For example, wouldn't it be interesting to put the blind pig in and have a dining experience like that, or that sort of thing? And this was the first time Universal actually dealt with a situation where they had 2 IPs coming head to head. Because, of course, this summer we get the first of the new Universal monster movie cinematic universe films, the Mummy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, so it was one of these things where one arm of creative was sort of looking at the Mummy building, and it's like, we should put our Fantastic Beast experience in there. And it's like, well, you see, we license that. We don't actually own that.
Yeah.
Whereas we own Mummy. And, if that turns out to be a hit film, and more to the point, they've been trying to get a strong Universal Monsters presence in the park forever. And they never quite work. I mean, I'm sure you guys have been to the restaurant on property.
I have to say that we haven't. We've sort of skirted around the outside of it. We've never been in it.
Has it been closed most of the times we've been?
No, I've just heard it's really bad.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, it's definitely, what is it? It's a buffeteria. The last time I was in there, you sort of, grab your tray and slide down the line. And, if you're a fan of, that era of movie making, I mean, there's wonderful posters and the decor of the place is fun if you're a movie fan of that particular stuff. But you're right. I mean, it's not, people kind of look at that and look, oh, it's old, it's hokey. And on the West Coast, of course, they tried to do the the that was tied to Van Helsing, I want to say. Sort of the walk through Dracula's castle thing.
Wasn't it called Universal's House of Horrors? Is that right?
It changed names several times, and each time, I genuinely felt bad. In fact, I had a friend who was one of the leads there for many years, and just talked about how people would sort of lurch from scene to scene to scene, and it's just sort of like, that's it. It's like, yeah, sorry.
Isn't that where The Walking Dead is now, Jim?
Yeah, in fact, but again, same situation. This is one of these things where it's like, you have your first, walk-through attraction with, some amazing effects. I mean, I remember chatting with the folks who were building it, and just the way they were talking about the burning cabin, that actually, because of the steam effect they can do, they can project flames onto the steam clouds, and you swear combination of the heat and the visual and the fact that it's moving in the steam, your eyes are telling you that's actually on fire. This is that in fact they pulled down that castle and put now it's the equivalent of Main Street for Universal. Significant amount of retail on the right side of the street as you're headed out of the park, but directly behind that is where the Walking Dead walkthrough attraction is. And again, the problem there is they don't own that. They have to. Yeah. They made a deal with the folks who have the Walking Dead IP. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's been some concern at Universal, given that just in the past year that they launched the spin-off series Fear the Walking Dead, and the ratings have been a little bit off for the series on AMC. And the thinking is that maybe America's getting zombied out, and
it's not just America.
Yeah,
me especially.
Zombies.
Yeah. I think people are getting sick of old school zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, definitely.
But that's the thing. When you're as old as I am, old school zombie, you mean like the Romero stuff? Where it's like, I have a budget of $35. Okay, you dribble chocolate syrup out of your mouth. Okay, you're a zombie.
Jim, I have to ask: have you heard any rumors of that replacing Terminator 2 at Universal Studios Florida?
Well, look, it's a primo piece of real estate. Okay. Has been for years. More to the point, when was the last time you were in that attraction?
2015 for us.
Okay.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Okay. Because this really is an old school attraction. I mean, think about it. It's almost a 25-30 minute experience.
Mm-hmm.
And more to the point, I'm sure when you were in there, again, you've got these kids who came into the park because, hey, we're going to go see Harry Potter, and so, that's, and we'll do this Terminator thing because it's the first thing we walk by. And to hear the genuinely frightened little kids because of the machine gun fire over your head and, the giant monster that's attacking you from, 3 sides of the theater. It's no longer really fitting in with what that park is. Yeah. I mean, if you think about, we lost Jaws with the burned and scarred shark that's trying to eat your face. Look, 2 months out of the year when it's Halloween Horror Night at Universal, this attraction fits. Right now, it doesn't. And more to the point, Terminator, how many reboots of Terminator have now tanked?
All of them.
Yeah.
That's what I see as being more of the problem with that, is that it's not really resonating with the current generations, despite them trying to freshen up the intro video and do things like that. The disappointing thing is it's got the live actors there, and that's something I love to see at Universal.
Absolutely.
And to lose to lose that again with something that cool and interactive, Gary Goddard, James Cameron did an incredible job with that, and it's kind of sad to lose that experience as it is as a whole. Like you always hear so much about the Star Trek experience in Las Vegas that I'll never personally get to see. Something that immersive.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that in that it was a landmark thing. I would like to see them pick it up gently and place it somewhere else.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I know.
The other thing, frankly, is that the world has changed in the past 20 years or so of theme park going. I mean, face it, when anybody builds an attraction these days, the attraction itself is what, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? I mean, I think. Kong, the Skull Island, that they were actually, I remember talking with Mike West about it. He was really proud of the fact that, this is almost just a 6 minute long experience. That's, a full minute or two longer than anything, these days. I mean, because typically it's 3 or 4 minutes and they boot you out the door, that sends you out to the gift shop. And, but that, see, what drives that is how much we're spending now for theme park tickets. I mean, the rule, I mean, again, that's from my dealings with Mr. Testa, the Len of the Unofficial Guide, the hard fact of it is with theme park tickets one day, cruising up just shy of $100 and most often more than that, people want at least 9 to 10 experiences during their time in the park. That's when they feel like they've gotten their money's worth, they've gotten their value.
Yeah.
And if you're spending a half hour having giant Terminators fire machine guns over your head, you can't be getting in line for other ride shows or experiences, and that that cuts into your time to get those 9 to 10 experiences.
But then surely the trade-off with that then, Jim, is that you need those attractions that eat people for a long time to keep the lines down in the rest of the park, to keep them down to a manageable level. Otherwise, like we said when we came over in 2015, that it really does lack, both parks really lack a real people eater, a decent show, something that's going to take people out of the lines in the rest of the park for a decent length of time.
Well, I might argue. I mean, if you think about how ingenious the design is of the Hogwarts Express, and how many people are transported back and forth between the. I mean, think about it. But prior to that opening, we were all fretting about, there'll be hour-long lines, and what if you left your bags in a locker in another park, and blah, 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 and none of that happened. I mean, it operated smoothly from day one. People were ridiculously entertained. The only complaint I ever hear about Hogwarts Express is occasionally that the queue line, because they were so afraid of people standing in queue line. I mean, you march for 1.5 miles.
Yes.
Before
especially on the Hogsmeade side, yeah. Actually, the complaint we hear about the Hogwarts Express more isn't to do with the line, it's to do with Hermione's voice, but let's not go down that route.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They got Rupert back. And my understanding with Universal Creative is they always thought that Emma would eventually come around. And now that, she's, in fact, what is it? The gentleman who was in charge of Warner Brothers, who's now, Alan Horn, who's now in charge of Disney. I mean, he actually, honestly, I think if he'd stayed at Warner's, she could have been persuaded, but that he went to Disney and he was the one who personally recruited her to be Belle in the Beauty and the Beast that'll be debuting in March. So but that's what's fascinating about her is I have heard that Warner Brothers has actually had conversations with her, with Rupert, and of course Daniel about Cursed Child, because they want to do for lack of a better term, they want this to be the Harry Potter, The Force Awakens. That they want this movie, this trilogy of movies to have these, the actors that we know and love from the original films that we watch growed up as adults. And, and of course they're hiring a bunch of new younger actors to play their children with the hope that, and if we can lean on JK, maybe they'll be, the cursed adolescent.
I still need to read that book. I haven't yet. I got it for Christmas. I'm desperate to read it, even though a lot of people kind of weren't overly enamored with what it did to the original set of books. But anyway, I'll find out for myself.
Well, it's full of a lot of fan service. But let's be honest. If you look at the Wizarding World, that's full of fan service. I mean, here's your wand pointing at something. Oh, it worked. It's just, there's a lot of people who've made a lot of money, for the Universal Parks and Warner Brothers, just in the back of Butterbeer, just read about it and saw it in movies, and now I get to have it. So, there's as far as the accountants are, concerned, there's nothing wrong with fan service.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as you charge. So,
Jim, I have to ask something that we've discussed quite a bit that's kind of coming up with Volcano Bay, and there's been sort of little tests in the park already. Are we going to see some sort of magic band system at the parks? Obviously, with Tapu Tapu coming to Volcano Bay, and they did the test, I think it was just before Christmas with the return time thing for Shrek. They're obviously planning something.
Yeah. That said, you have to understand that, and this is actually coming on the back of survey work that, don't get me wrong. Magic bands for Disney were prohibitively expensive, a technological nightmare. Once they finally started to work, people loved them, and, that's the thing. People, and these aren't closed off worlds that as we talked about at the top of the show with Nancy's friends, that people who are vacationing at Walt Disney World are going over to Universal, and they have had this, I want to buy a churro. I wave it at the little thing and I can walk away, or I can program my arrival times or whatever. They want that to continue when they go over to Universal. And so Universal, the Volcano Bay system is to sort of just get it out there, see how people respond. And you're right about the Shrek test, that it's just sort of like, all right, it's in the park. How do they respond? Of course, the irony is that, here you've got, this is now NBC Universal that has bought DreamWorks Animation. And, they, so now they're actually eyeballing the DreamWorks catalog of characters and, trying to figure out, okay, so, we've had this Shrek film for these many years. And, we've been hesitant to expand. I mean, they put in that wonderful sort of, what is it, photo op that's right across the street there. That got beefed up and added, I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Is that the Donkey's Photo Finish, the interactive thing?
Yeah. Only, but to also have Fiona and Shrek there and to theme it so it's that much better an image capture kind of a thing, and particularly in today's selfie-driven world. Right. But yeah, that's they are now looking at bringing the DreamWorks characters, which now they own, so they don't have to license, into the parks in a much bigger way. And so, don't honestly be surprised if, we may actually see Shrek 4D go away to become its own Shrek-driven land.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is where it gets kind of intriguing, because we've got kind of a Disney Pixar situation going on that Illuminations, Illuminations is, for a lot of people in the animation industry, is the company to watch now, because they have made these hugely successful films for about a half, sometimes a third of what it costs Pixar and DreamWorks to make a film. And which means they come at a profit that much faster. So it's one of these things where you're in this weird space now where you've got a Pixar and a Blue Sky and that sort of thing looking over their shoulder at Illuminations, and yet if you remember, when Disney bought Pixar in 2006 and put John Lasseter in charge of both Pixar and Disney feature animation, there was this weird period where it's like, well, what does a Disney film look like with a John Lasseter calling the shots? And, thankfully, John did eventually kind of sort it out. And that's how we ended up with, massive hits like Tangled and Frozen. And in fact, the one that just won, last night, the Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature, Zootopia, which, as soon as Pandora opens, look for that to come to Animal Kingdom in a big, big way. Just get ready to wave bye-bye to Rafiki's Planet Watch.
That's no
But
loss.
now, Chris Miliandri, the head of Illumination Entertainment, they pulled a John Lasseter. He's going to be in charge of both DreamWorks Animation and Illumination Entertainment. And his job is to, get DreamWorks financials in place, to get them out of the situation where they're spending $150, $200 million per film. But he's also been handed things like, we want to do a new Shrek movie. We want to revive this franchise, only with you calling the shots. And, and one of the reasons they want to do that is they want to do Shrek, is hugely popular in the parks, but they feel like with just a film, he's kind of wasted, and with a photo op. And this is easily, if you look around the globe at the various different Shrek things that have been done, like for example, the park in Singapore, the roller coaster that recreates the Puss in Boots experience, that sort of thing. That there's a belief that, this is a character, this is a world that could support a whole land, which again brings us back to Wet n Wild and, the properties, the Lockheed property. It's right now, it's all of these sorts of what are people going to want to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and that's what Universal is trying to sort out at this moment. They know that in fact, it's driving Disney crazy that they got Nintendo, because even Disney's internals, the work they know there's this whole generation of kids who've grown up and now are gaming with their own children, and they're dying to go to a park where they can, that they can race along with Mario, where they, that they, they can go on an adventure with Link, that sort of thing. And so,
it's tapping into a market that theme parks haven't really tapped into yet. Universal have dabbled in it a little bit with Halloween Horror Nights doing Silent Hill and Resident Evil. But beyond that...
The fact that this is cross-generational, really cross-generational as well.
Actually, then you look as well, you think, I know when we first went to Universal back in 2004, they had Crash Bandicoot as a walk-around character in the park.
Mm-hmm. Love Crash.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You're I'm sure you heard the same story as I heard about, the Kid Zone, the Curious George, Barney, Woody Woodpecker, and that sort of thing. That was all supposed to go away, and that was where the original Nintendo Land was supposed to go. Mm-hmm. But supposedly one of the things that really tripped that up was Steven Spielberg. They wanted to put the Mario racing attraction inside of the E.T. Adventure Building. Right. And Mr. Spielberg did not only said no, he said hell no. And here's the thing. Universal really feels like they need Spielberg. They need to keep him happy because they want him to be part of the launch of the Beijing park.
Okay.
In Chinese society, there's, it's kind of a carryover but basically that you honor your elders, and it's strange for me to think, because this means that I got old. But Steven Spielberg set it off as this young Turk who is now seen as sort of an elderly statesman of Hollywood, and so that's the whole point of Universal wants him front and center when they launch Beijing, and so. Keeping Steven happy, that means you have to keep the E.T. adventure in place. Even though I think we all agree that, the E.T. adventure has a wonderful queue and kind of a crappy ride.
It's that second half. It's that second half of that ride, man. It's just bizarre.
I know. And it just, and that's the thing. It's like, not a family-friendly thing to say, but it's one of these things where you look at that and it's like, okay, if you were on drugs, they weren't good drugs. All right, this isn't, that they're all really bad characters. I mean, just, there isn't anything in there that doesn't look like, wow, this is like bargain basement Hanna-Barbera.
Welcome home.
It's just that. And look, there's nothing about that ride that couldn't be improved by, say, liberal use of a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, just sort of like, there was a fire in the last half of the ride. Now we have to revisit it. And back in the day, yes, the E.T. saying your name was. Okay, that's kind of cool, but when you think of how many people have, Alexa or Google thing in their house right now, and it's like, that's not quite as cool as it used to be.
That's funny though when you think that that's what Disney have been trying to implement as like the second or third phase of Magic Bands.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's one thing to sit around a conference table and spin that out. It's another thing to for example, when they put it in Small World, the flat panel, so you could see the doll that you designed, or it would acknowledge your anniversary. And what they found when they fired it up for tests is that it's Small World. There's a billion things for you to look at. And what are the chances you're actually going to be looking at the flat panel at the moment that your doll dances, or it says, "Hey, Steve and Tiffany, congratulations on your 35th anniversary." There's a lot of stuff that Magic Bands was supposed to do that just in real life, because you're in a Disney theme park, just didn't turn out to be practical. In fact, coming back to Tapu Tapu, that's what's ingenious about the folks at Universal, and that's the thing. They didn't look for this to be every single thing that you wanted in the park. It wasn't going to, fold your towels and answer your mail for you. It's a system that tells you when to show up for your ride. All right. And it does that very well. And more to the point, it does that when it gets wet. That if you talk with the people at Disney, the thing about Magic Bands is they tried to make it everything, from day one. Yeah. From the notion of you're going to pick all your ride times, 3 months out from when you got to the parks, or when you go back to your hotel room, look at all your photos for that day. And that's really not how people vacation.
No.
And that brings us back to Wet n Wild and to the Lockheed property. The conversation that both Disney and Universal are having right now is some of it is actually it comes on the back of what happened this past year with Pokemon Go. If you think about these days, if you go to the mall, you go to the parks, and think about it, you're in this multi-million, highly themed environment, and how many of the people around you are face down on their phones?
Everybody. Me and my oldest have had conversations all the time about you're going to find in the next 20 or 30 years that the generation that's our age now and a little bit older are going to have neck and hand problems from looking down at a phone. He was actually telling me, because he's a psychology student, and apparently The human body's already starting to change to accommodate how people hold their phones. They're beginning to get a curvature in your little finger because everyone rests the phone on their little finger.
That's
Yeah.
well, okay. I was kind of hoping the prehensile tail would come back, but I guess that's okay, but that's the thing. If you're designing a theme park, and for example, when Pokemon Go came about, the Universal Creative team immediately, it's like, wow, okay, should we incorporate this into the park? Should we have these rarer than rare, things that you can only find with your phone? And I can't reveal the name of the gentleman who in the meeting who brought this up, but it's like, tell me in the 3 to 5 years that it's going to take to build this, that we'll still be using our phones in that way, that this will still be a thing. Just this whole notion of betting the farm on this is going to be something that stays with us, that and more to the point, people are going to be excited about searching using their phones, and more to the point, how do you then create a system within the park that accommodates Apple, that accommodates Motorola, that the Galaxies, all that? It's again, it becomes this technological boondoggle, and frankly, again, circling back to Disney with Magic Bands, everybody in the theme park industry doesn't want to repeat Disney's mistakes, where you're pouring $2 and $3 billion down a technological rat hole that in the end, people only make a 10th or a 15th percent of use of what you designed the system for.
I think Universal have been doing that for quite a while, though. They're quite happy to sit back and watch everybody make the mistakes with the new technology, and then when they do come to do it, like they are now, they'll do it, and it will roll out, as relatively smoothly as it can.
Well, but at the same time, it just, as we talked about at the top of the show, it just sort of, this is the one ripple that's hitting Universal from Disney's side, that this whole notion of they want a Magic Band equivalent, and they're addressing it. But, looking ahead to Volcano Bay, in fact, what's kind of interesting is that it's now looking like Pandora, the World of Avatar, will be opening in July of 2017. In fact, I was feeling so bad last week because Disney had released some new admissions media that strictly aimed at Floridians, and they blocked out certain dates in Animal Kingdom, and people immediately assumed that's when Avatar was going to open up, and booking vacation packages, and it was one of these things where it's like, no, remember what happened with Rivers of Light? All those people who I'm going to be among the first to see this show, and we're still all waiting. And no, I know from folks who are actually working on the project. In fact, what's kind of interesting is a lot of the construction people and that have already rolled off of Avatar and are actually overall working on Star Wars Experience and Toy Story Land. But the finishing people are going to be in there right up until the middle of July, whether it's the bioluminescent lighting or the AA figures or the food experience or all of that. So that's the earliest that's going to open. And so Volcano Bay looks to be opening late May, early June. I mean, it's the same thing. That when you ask people at Universal, they say summer, and that's which gives them that 3-month wide berth. But they want that to come to market at the exact same time as Avatar, so people can, whether it's the nighttime lighting program, in fact, that's one of the things that, they're kind of holding back, but they're really proud of. This park at night, when they start doing the the lava effect, projected in the waterfalls, you're going to want to hang in this park at least at night to catch that 1 or 2 nights, because it's going to be spectacular.
Yeah. Sorry, Jim. I know you talk about Volcano Bay and they're still saying summer, but I can go on ticket brokers over in this country now and I can buy a ticket for Volcano Bay that says it is valid for use from the 1st of June.
Yeah, because we saw the advert on the TV, didn't we?
Yeah, we've already got commercials here that on the TV over here that are stating that Volcano Bay opens the 1st of June.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, that's what we thought.
Don't get me wrong. You guys are obviously a hugely important market.
Absolutely.
That Universal loves the UK. So it's one of these things where they want you guys excited. They want you coming over. And yes, the marketing people are saying, June 1st. But let's remember that the construction people, the ones who lost so much of that equipment due to that fire. So, they're still waiting for a lot of those, those duplicate pieces to come and show up. And so it's like, you're telling people June 1st. It's like, yes, and you'll be done then.
Okay.
Good luck with that then.
But that's the way Universal plays, isn't it?
It's just sort of like, they're waiting for things that have to be winched into place to finish this off. And, replacement pieces, some amazingly heavily designed things that are still being worked on that have to be shipped here and locked into place. I mean,
it would be interesting to see what happens if people do turn up with tickets dated on June 1st and it's not open on June 1st.
Yeah, and let's remember that when you have a June 1st opening, you want to have at least 2 and 3 weeks ahead of time. Yeah. I mean, you've got all these Wet n Wild people, the lifeguards and that sort of thing, who will need to get into this park and learn how this one operates as opposed to Wet n Wild. So yeah, don't get me wrong, that they pretty much did the same thing with remember with Diagon Alley. There were a number of packages that were sold, that people couldn't use for 6 weeks. So let's just hope they're right this time. And by the way, what do you think of the ads? What are the visuals selling you on it?
It looks amazing. It really does. Like I'm always wanting to come to Universal anyway, but the first time we saw that commercial on the TV, I was like, oh my god, I need to go back now.
Yeah, I was a bit choked up. I was just like, I need to go home.
They look, comparing it, because it's that time, it's after Christmas, everyone's in the lull. Now's when our summer vacation commercials come on. And if you watched, I think we've got a lot for the 25th anniversary of Disneyland Paris coming up, and then obviously like the Walt Disney World ones and the Universal Orlando ones. And the Universal Orlando ones, obviously I'm slightly biased doing what we do, but it does entice me much more than the Disney ones do.
Well, and somewhere there's a marketing person who's very happy to hear that. That's but what intrigues me is that but you're not seeing anything for Fallon, right? There's no. Yeah. They've actually begun casting for are going to be, sort of characters within this world or within this attraction.
Yeah, we actually know a couple of people who've just been for casting calls for #ThePanda.
Oh, good. Okay. And they'll supposedly make decisions on those hirings in mid-February. The plan is to get them in there doing tech rehearsals and that sort of thing come March. And it'll be intriguing to see whether or not they bundle the two openings. I mean, whether they throw open Fallon, sort of like what they did with Despicable Me, how that was open for a number of weeks before the official grand opening. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they'll bundle the two events. My understanding is they want Fallon to actually come down and do at least 1 or 2 nights of shows in Volcano Bay.
That would be cool.
So, but open his attraction and then hang on and shoot the show and then do all sorts of games and stunts there on the beach. So, the whole world gets, or excuse me, anybody who's watching NBC gets to see the new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then, after that, they sort of march through their summer. They, we get, once again, Halloween Horror Nights and, slide into the holiday season. But sometime shortly, we'll get our first views of what the Nintendo Land looks like. And what's intriguing to me is I keep hearing that Hollywood is going to get to unveil their Nintendo Land first.
Right.
Orlando will get held back, and in fact, we may have to wait as long as this press event for Volcano Bay and the ride through New York attraction. Figuring that if they can get all of the press down there, and then they can do a big reveal as part of this event.
Okay.
But then you then get to they fall back on the Harry Potter playbook, and they'll just breadcrumb us out for the next 18 months while they get this thing up out of the ground.
I know, sort of looking ahead as well, because I think originally Fast and Furious was supposed to open this year, but that's been pushed back and nothing's really been said about it, and we still don't really know what it's going to be. But I know, talking to a lot of people that we talk to, no one's particularly excited about it, having seen the sort of Hollywood version.
Yeah, that let's be honest here. I've gotten to walk the building there while they were constructing it. It's an amazing physical plant. I mean, that there's amazing technology. That there's a real craft to it. But in the end, the ride experience just is kind of a meh. And let's face it, you just don't buy having been on that tram and listen to it groan and strain as it drives uphill, in Hollywood, that now you're suddenly going at 150 miles an hour in Los Angeles. It's like, there's suspension of disbelief, and then there's a lobotomy.
Yeah.
All right. And, I didn't get the lobotomy coming in today. So yeah, I will tell you flat out from my conversations with the folks at Orlando, they shifted the opening date because it was already a busy year. They got Volcano Bay and Jimmy Fallon. And more to the point, given that Nintendo, the earliest it was going to come online was 2019, it's just like, look, why are we rushing? That we get to open this in 2018. That gives us something to talk about, something to compel people to come down. It's a little frustrating because originally when Creative was building this thing, they wanted to take advantage of the fact that the new, Fast and Furious was opening in 2017. And, with the hope of, okay, we can bring the cast here and we can tie it in and there's all sorts of synergy. And it's like, no, we're going to push it back a year. And it's just sort of like, thanks, and thank you for destroying our promotional hook. But yeah, that's what that really is about. It's cold-bloodedly mothballing an attraction. And don't get me wrong, this has been done before. For example, when Disney opened Toontown in January of 1993, at Disneyland, Roger Rabbit Cartoon Spin was complete. I mean, that day they could have thrown open that attraction and people have gone through it. Disney deliberately kept it in mothballs for a year.
Wow.
So they'd have something in 1994 to talk up. So, I mean, it's not unprecedented. But yeah, that's one of the other things, frankly, was that, people weren't all that excited. And, one hopes that this new version of the ride film, which, is supposed to send you through San Francisco, will be that much more successful. But yeah, it's not necessarily anything that anybody's really, really excited about, but it will give them something to talk up and hype in 2018.
Do we know what it's going to be then? Is it literally just, is it going to be like a Transformers sort of Spider-Man type thing? Or is it going to be like Kong?
It's look, a lot of the pre-existing ride system has been gutted at this point.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that the physical plant is very much the same, except you extend into this far larger space. I mean, again, anybody who's been on the finale, so to speak, of the Universal Tram Tour in Hollywood knows what this experience is going to be like. The difference is that that they're, rather than being locked into the earthquake ride mechanism, they're trying to really beef up that element of it. In fact, a lot of the survey work that they did in California, just people came back and just talked about, I'm sitting in a tram. I know I'm sitting in a tram, and no amount of being on a motion base convinces me that this is really happening. So look for a lot more movement. And they're also trying to do a lot more physical effects than they did in California. The whole notion of, that the thinking is, would you buy it if instead of a projected helicopter, you had a physical helicopter? Again, I don't want to give too much away here, but they are addressing a lot of the concerns. And more to the point, that they understand that given how many people are charging to the back of the park to go to Diagon Alley, it would be really helpful to have an attraction that people actually wanted to go on, in that back part of the park. I mean, for example, that's one of the reasons why, let's be blunt here, Transformers, if you look at the period that led up to the opening of Diagon Alley, between opening, Fast Food Boulevard and, the expanding the Simpsons world, that's one way people were going to charge back to Diagon Alley. And then to build Transformers, basically in the exact, on the other side of the lagoon, these two were very expensive speed bumps that prevented, from what I understand, Universal, it's survey work. They're very proud of the fact that roughly a third of the people who are, coming to the park and are determined to get back to Diagon Alley end up either getting trapped by Transformers or stopping to get something, whether it's a donut or that sort of thing, in Simpsons Land. Diagon Alley is never swamped the way they anticipated or they feared, because they put these two things in place beforehand. And and that kind of factors into Fast and Furious. That the hope is that because that's the other thing that's coming. Have we talked yet about the Potter holiday program?
We haven't, but I've heard a lot of rumors about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Starting, and it could be as early as this year, more likely pushed off to 2018. They have been, they want to move beyond hot butterbeer. They want to give people who have been to the Wizarding World a reason to go back. And so, there have been things that have been on and off the table, like the Yule Ball, which would actually involve, doing something offsite at one of the hotels. But they're looking to do some holiday theming in the Wizarding World. It's been kind of difficult because, of course, JK has to sign off on it, and she wants to get Stuart Craig and that bunch involved. And frankly, Stuart's a little busy with the Fantastic Beasts movies right now. But yeah, we look for a holiday program coming to Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley. It's not going to be, a Mickey's Very Merry kind of thing. I mean, again, this is Potter, and kind of, understated, which is kind of bizarre to think about the amount of magic in that part of the park, but it's holly boughs and that sort of thing. But look for a full holiday program.
They need something over at Islands of Adventure, because I think we've discussed on this show quite a lot that the holiday offerings at Universal have become very samey now. The Macy's Parade still fantastic, but it's the same thing pretty much every year. Grinchmas has become the same thing, and then you look at what they've done out. Was it Hollywood or Singapore this year where they had the Christmas stuff and the Halloween Horror Nights stuff as well?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And well, that's. I'm always kind of fascinated by, for example, the Death Eater thing that they were doing in Japan. And it's just sort of like, I know from, JK is very hands-on. And, in fact, if you remember, those times for Halloween Horror Nights where they weren't allowing, people into Diagon Alley because it was like they didn't want it to be grim. I don't know. It's one of these situations where right now, if we're talking about the holidays at Universal, you have to remember that we have the brand new version of Grinch that's coming.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's November 2018. It's, and it's Benedict Cumberbatch. I was just telling somebody the other day, how could you not? I mean, I know a lot of us, are still trying to wash the taste of the Jim Carrey movie out of our mouth.
I love that film.
Do you really?
Yeah, and it's Tracy's favorite film.
What? Really? Tracy?
Oh, the Grinch is my favorite.
Yeah, but I couldn't see anybody else as the Grinch other than Jim Carrey. I think he's fantastic.
I have the Grinch tattooed on my arm.
You have the Grinch tattooed on your arm. But
like with all the other Zeus characters.
Not the Jim Carrey version.
Oh, no. Proper original Zeus Grinch.
Okay, well, there we go. And, the weird thing is when I look at, the Carrey film from 2000, I mean, I see the craft, and in fact, it's interesting that the theme parks have grabbed that and sort of mutated it as, the Chuck Jones, Dr. Seuss, Jim Carrey version into something that can work for the parks. But I have to tell you, from what people are telling me about the Cumberbatch version that again, Illumination Entertainment is doing, this is Grinch done right. And what's interesting is on the back of this, supposedly, and this is where it gets somewhat dicey, because in order to bring this to the parks, I mean, we've been hearing about the Mount Crumpet coaster for years and years and years at this point. But on the back of this movie that everyone, really is excited about, and more to the point, the notion of, if we can get Cumberbatch to actually be doing, the voice work that would be used in the attraction, that's huge. But that would be, the interesting thing is supposedly, from what I've been hearing, Disney, understanding that the earliest we're going to see Star Wars Experience opening to the public is 2019. You then end up in this situation where it's like, and knowing how quickly Universal can do things, can you get a Mount Crumpet coaster up and running in Seuss Landing? That's. You've been to the chocolate place, right? I'm blanking the name of the Chocolate Emporium.
Darren has, we haven't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There is a ridiculous amount of open space behind the Chocolate Emporium. So, in fact, anyone who's been to, sort of taken the backstage and gotten into the queue to go into the soundstage to the Grinch knows that there's significant space back there. But the question then becomes, if you're going to build this attraction, and more to the point, you have this ride system at the back of the park that connects the two parks. do you use Mount Crumpet, the Mount Crumpet project, as an excuse to finally link the two Universal parks from the front? And what does that then mean to Blue Man Group? See, that's the thing, that Universal, one of the things that for me, what fascinates me about Universal is they are so smart about how they've used their land. But now with this new hotel that's been announced, they've pretty much eaten a lot of, all of the allotted land that they have, which is why they were going to begin to pivot on Wet and Wild and, of course, the Lockheed property. But that doesn't mean that they can't take things that are there and necessarily change them out. Obviously, NBA City, which just showed, that you could take that and change that into a vibrant new themed the chocolate restaurant. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about going through the park and being systematic about this, about, taking, whether it's Shrek, the 4D movie, and it's like, could Shrek be a whole land? Seuss's Landing, would it be possible to put a family coaster in there? There's even been discussion, and this sort of ties into, you're aware that Jurassic World is supposed to be a trilogy of films, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's been some pretty significant discussion about, with the Lockheed property, face it, Jurassic Park, 1999 version of Islands of Adventure. It's like, okay, that's our castle. That's what drives us to the back of the park. But is this a question of, could we do better? Because face it, that if you think about what Jurassic Park was like when it initially opened, I mean, you have the Triceratops encounter, you have all of this land there that's just not being used. And you, frankly, let's be honest about the Jurassic River adventure. In a park that's already got, a pretty good water ride, the bilge ride, the Popeye experience, which is right next to the Dudley Do-Ride experience. It's like, do we really need 3 water rides like within a quarter of a mile of one another? Couldn't we be doing something else with these? That to me is what's fascinating about Universal Creative, is that, a Disney that, would leave, think about it, how long did Tomorrowland, remain Yesterdayland at the Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom? We got lucky they changed out Stitch, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Universal wants a much more dynamic park, that they want you to come back and be nostalgic. But at the same time, as was proven with Jaws, or for that matter, what they did with Lost Continent, they are willing to roll the dice in a big way and to change out entire areas of the park. And frankly, the thinking right now is, when you look at Jurassic Park, could we be doing something else with this? That given where the story has gone with Jurassic World, could we be doing something that much more ambitious? Could we be doing something that much more hands-on? Could this IP actually support an entire theme park?
Really?
Yeah. This is the thing with Universal Creative. It's a very, very, very small team.
Yeah.
But they aren't afraid to think big. And, right now, attention is basically focused on, clearing the stuff that's already been announced in the docks, the Fallon, the Volcano Bay, and Fast and Furious, and getting Nintendo in its most rudimentary form out the door. But again, just remember that there was a version of this that was only, going forward because they had the Wet and Wild property. And then suddenly they had the Lockheed property. And, and with the Lockheed property being right next to the convention center, the question is, what are we going to build that we have tens of thousands of people, several times a week who are in that convention facility. What are we going to get to make them come out the door to come to our park? And it's like, so, and let's face it, restaurants, shops, that's not going to do it because, that's all that's already on international. It's got to be something stunning. It's got to be something absolutely startling. And so, that's the thing they're looking at right now. It's just sort of what's big enough to get people to walk out of that convention center. And, when you think big, you think dinosaurs. So, but again, just understand this is a lazy Susan situation that ideas are, brought to the front and then it's just sort of like, I don't, do we really want to go forward with that? Or do we really want to pull that out of that park? Or do we really want to, take, again, doubling back on Shrek, we have an asset, Shrek 4D that's been popular for a lot of years, but it's in the dead center of the park. It's right across from Despicable Me. Should we maybe be thinking about, maybe designating the front half of the park as our Illuminations entertainment area? And you've heard the same stories I've heard about the Secret Life of Pets attraction. And it's just sort of the notion of, if we did think about putting, say, another Illumination entertainment attraction directly across the street there, or for that matter, doubling back the Terminator, that's not, you could create this loose configuration of Illumination entertainment-based attractions in this one space at the front of the park. I apologize if it sounds like I'm all over the map here, but this is what's fascinating about Universal right
absolutely.
now. Just nothing is, nothing sacred right now. That there's nothing about, what they're considering about doing with these parks marching forward for the next 5 to 10 years. Just don't consider that when you look at a ride or a show that, well, that's always going to be here.
Yeah.
Because that's really not the case with Universal. They are seriously having discussions about, do we pull Mummy out for a Fantastic Beasts experience, or do we put the brand new Tom Cruise version of the Mummy character in there? And this just goes on and on and on, whereas, which is why, in a weird sort of way, I feel kind of bad for Disney, because they're like, all right, we'll open Avatar, and then we'll open, Toy Story Land and Star Wars Experience, and after that, Zootopia, and we'll put a few things in Epcot, and that'll show them, that'll stop them going from Universal. And they have honestly no clue about how dynamic Universal is looking to make its park, in the next 5 to 10 years, whether it's Nintendo stuff or bringing these new films in, or taking things that we know and love already, like Shrek, and making them that much more hands-on.
Absolutely.
No, it's honestly a fascinating time. Because again, this is, we're waiting for Disney's response to Universal, and then it gets fun, because then we get to see Universal's response to Disney, and man, there's some great stuff in the pipeline. I guess that's, how much of this finally actually makes it through.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, but there are a lot of fascinating ideas on the table right now.
And it's going to be interesting watching it go. So, absolutely, yes, I think that's a good place to wrap up then, Jim.
Okay.
So, I really appreciate you taking the time out. It's going to be interesting. You know, we've discussed it on the show. It's like, what is that next stage of theme park? No one knows, and it's really going to be interesting to see what they come out with.
I think the thing that makes me crazy is that so much of this, you know, I've been covering theme parks for 35 years now, God, and so much of this, you know, often is driven by intangibles. You know, that whether it's, you know, a film does well over its opening weekend, or, you know, for example, you know, the very thing you were talking about with Johnny Depp, and you know, how you didn't want to see him in Fantastic Beasts, and there's a lot of people now who believe because of Johnny's marital difficulties that he may have, that may be the reason that Alice threw the looking glass tanked. And in fact, you know, it's hard not to assume that Disney is concerned about this, given. Have you seen the trailer for Dead Men Tell No Tales?
I haven't yet, but I'm hearing it's quite a lot better than most the recent-ish ones.
Well, yeah, but you can go watch it online now. But you know, there's a very interesting thing about this. It's entirely Johnny Depp free. Oh. You know, that's the central character of these movies is you know, Jack Sparrow, and while you have people talking about Jack Sparrow, you never get to see Johnny.
Interesting.
So yeah, and let's remember that he's not just Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts. He's also the Invisible Man in the brand new Universal monster movie cinematic universe.
So at least we just have to hear him and not look at him.
Well, okay.
To be honest, the worst thing he ever did was take on the role of Jack Sparrow, because after that, that was the only character he could play, and I was a huge Johnny Depp fan until every other character became Jack Sparrow.
Yeah,
he's just an iteration of Jack Sparrow in pretty much everything he does now. Like Tonto was like an Indian Jack Sparrow.
You know, but and some future show we'll talk about. You didn't get the right version of the Lone Ranger.
No,
in fact,
I have heard about that.
The two gentlemen who wrote Terry Russo and Ted Elliott, who wrote the Curse of the Black Pearl, wrote the first script for the Lone Ranger, and you have to understand that they had figured out, you know, how the Lone Ranger only uses, you know, his calling card is a silver bullet. The reason he was using silver bullets is he was taking out Wendigos, which are the Native American version of a werewolf.
Yeah.
So that was what got that project going, that Disney lost its nerve and decided it didn't want to make that. But again, that's a story for another time. Yes. And we're now into our 12th hour of this show, so I'm going to shut up now.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Jim. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you on again this year, maybe about Fallon or when Volcano Bay opens or whatever. We'll have to get you and Seth together again. We haven't had that for a while.
Yes.
No, that would be cool. All right. Well, again, thanks for the invite. And again, I'm sorry to put so much info out there about all these vague projects, but again, it's there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes now, and it's just going to be interesting to see, you know, in this theme park chess game, what Disney or what Universal brings to bear against Disney in the next year or so.
Cool. Right. Well, as Jim said, that is going to wrap up the 12th hour of this podcast.
There we go.
So don't forget to go and check out Jim's stuff. You got, as I said, jimhillmedia.com. You are still writing for the HuffPost, yes?
Yep. And
the Disney Dish, definitely.
God help us, Len and I are actually doing live events this year. So you can,
cool.
God help you. So
definitely go and check all them. I'll put the links in the show notes. But that's going to wrap up episode 230. So for Jim, Tracy and Darren, I have been Lee. And see you next week.
That's it for another Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. Listen to us on Stitcher, Google Play, and all your podcast apps. Email us with any questions or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com, or even better, record your message at speakpipe.com/uuopodcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest, keyword UUO Podcast. Check out our blog for even more content at uuopodcast.com. Well, that's a wrap. See you next week.